Welcome back live to Le Mans, where the number 12 Rebellion Lola Coupe is currently in the garage, having just been pulled back in. Screen cleaning going on. Neil Yarney at the wheel, and just out of the pits and straight into the barriers, Tim Greaves plants the Ginetta very firmly. That's the Bruichladdich car.
Yeah.
He has just this minute left the pit lane. No, he is just this minute leaving the pit lane. So that was... Anyone? Hands up?
I think he did it actually on his way in, because I picked up the car when it came into the pits and I thought he just had a spin. Actually, that was the whole thing. That's a pre-record of what happened beforehand. But I just heard that in the air, so I was right.
That's him recovering out of the pits.
Yes.
Right.
He's been into the pit. They put it all right again. Out you go.
Back into real time.
Yeah. Don't find a Drados.
Dear Lord.
Don't do it again.
Do you remember in the 1970s when they started showing replays of tape, they had a big flashing R on them? Hello, anyone? If you're showing a replay, put replay up on the screen, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Fool anybody, especially an idiot like me.
Especially at this time of night.
Now then, while we're looking at the number 72 Alpha Adventure Corvette on pit lane, that's Jerome Policon, of course. Oh, alternator going in, so that's not got no electrics. In also comes Marcel Fassler's Audi. He will hand over to Ben Martellier's turn again. Oh, I can't remember which order they're in at the moment. We'll have to wait.
I think it is, isn't it?
Andre Lotterer.
Andre Lotterer, no. Shown as Japanese, of course. Andre Lotterer, the well-known Japanese driver from Switzerland. How so indeed? Well, they mostly earn their living in Japan. Actually, about half the Audi team do. The younger guys, but Andre Lotterer takes it over then. And they are currently lying third overall with Romain Dumas in the other Audi, the number 9 car, the other non-delayed Audi, in fourth position. Away he goes. It is just like metronomic work in the pit lane, isn't it? You know, and they'll still be doing that at 2 to 3 if necessary tomorrow afternoon. In, do it, done, go, quick.
So well drilled, the whole thing, isn't it? It's just quite a remarkable. It's second nature.
That's Reinhold Jost for you. You know, it's his team, and he's always run a team along those lines, and he's been a major force at Le Mans for many, many years.
As a driver and as a team and as a driver, he was a formidable driver, wasn't he?
Oh yes.
I mean, it wasn't. He was one of those drivers. I think over a long career doing this job, you've seen them and I've seen them. Some of them really, really work at it. They are the fact that they win races because they work at it.
Oh, and
he is a workaholic.
And Reinhold, yes, and a very intelligent.
Highly intelligent. Those eyes, they're piercing eyes, and you know when you look at him, the determination to succeed is just wow.
When he could actually beat the factory Porsche team in a private car, that takes some doing.
Names of the past, I know we were talking about it and joking about it over the weekend. Tom Walkinshaw was exactly the same. That was just that absolute determination that was going to overcome whatever the situation was. Tom was determined he was going to beat it.
Well, we may have the situation here this weekend with the Oreca team running the Peugeot, which they're doing so efficiently at the moment.
I can't capture a nicer bloke than Hughes Kellett. I mean, he's a lovely man and very much a father figure for anybody who drives for him, sort of arm around them, a lot of support and all that sort of thing. But I think if you cross him, it can be quite difficult.
GT2 leader on pit lane. I think we'll leave that slanderous line of pursuit a little further down the line. Olivier Barretto was the man at the helm of the 64 Corvette. Corvette still first and second in the GT2 class. Incidentally, we were enjoying very much early on the battle between this car number 64, and the Risi Competizione car number 82, driven by Jamie Malo, Jimmy Bruni and Pierre Cappa. That will continue no longer. In fact, it hasn't been going for some while, as Risi have run into a string of problems, predominantly gearbox related, and in the end, terminal. Risi are no more, at least that red car is no more. The one that's had a slightly harder time from the drivers, in terms of being hit off things rather than just being flailed around the track, the 83 Risi Competizione car, the Crane Racing green one, that I believe is still going. And for J-Lock fanciers, just ponder that phrase for a moment or two. It's still in the pits. Tsushi Yogo nominally at the wheel of the Japanese Lamborghini Owners Club Lamborghini Gallardo Murcielago, and that is slipping down the order, about to go into the Netherworld. That is page 3 of the timing screen, which we can't read. So once it drops off past 42nd, we will cease to score, or indeed probably even notice the J-Lock Lamborghini, I'm afraid. So Lamborghini fans, you might want to get your own timing monitors on your computer screens. In 2 is the car that is fourth in the GT2 class now, Roman Narak, the man who is Matmut. He is at the wheel of the car that he shares traditionally, of course, with Patrick Pilet, and they've had a lot of success at Le Mans in this car, and young American Pat Long joins them and considerably adds to the pace of their driver lineup. He's a very quick factory Porsche driver, and at least the match of any of the other guys in the other Porsche cars as well. And of course, the whole point of spreading the Porsche talent around as many teams as you possibly can is to try and make sure that Corvette and Ferrari and BMW and Aston Martin don't get to win Le Mans, and Porsche do. But at the moment, they are chasing, because Corvette's new GT2 program appears to be about as convincingly efficient as their old GT1 program was.
Yeah, when you get on the Porsche books as a Porsche driver, you know, a lot of people sort of say, I want to be a racing driver. I tell you what, you get on the Porsche books, like one or two of the names you mentioned, Pat Long among them, you're made, aren't you, really? Provided you're a good boy, you're made.
Well, you don't get in unless you are an extremely good boy. Yeah. I remember talking to Lucas Luhr years ago. He went to one of these big test days they have, and he was called back into the pits after 4 laps and told to get out. And he said, but you said I could have 10 laps. No, get out. And he was pulled out of the car because they said he was going recklessly fast. And then he was signed because he was going not recklessly fast, but incredibly controlled and fast. There is our field rundown. P2 class in blue, being led by the HPD of Danny Watts, with Marino Franchitti giving chase. Looks like those two have been in there for just about ever. In the GT2 class, the orangey yellow cars, yellow on our screens, orange on yours. It is Corvettes to the fore, and in GT1, the green cars. Gabriel Gardel, the leader, is on the pit road with the Celine coming down towards us as we speak. He is 2 laps ahead of the 73 Corvette of Julien Juste. There he is, even as we speak. And in 3rd place, Jonathan Hershey, still rolling in that Ford, which is now nearly 10 laps off the lead of the class, is 9 laps off the lead of the class. Thomas Enger 4th in the young driver Aston Martin. The DBR9 is in 5th class in fifth place position in GT1. Trent Policon in the Corvette in 6th place in GT1. That is the 2nd Alphon Aventura car. So there you see the Celine in its last race here at Le Mans. It will run out of homologation for Le Mans racing at the end of the year, and GT1 will pretty much, it would appear, cease to exist in at least its current form next year. Not sure that Le Mans are particularly over worried about taking on the new GT1 regulations. They've got so many cars in GT2, and including all the major manufacturers, that they might as well just expand GT2 and have more major manufacturers or more cars from major manufacturers, because from the side of the track, can you tell the difference between the Alphon Corvettes and the factory Corvettes?
No, not really. And the GT2, there are just so many manufacturers. It's looking fantastic. All right, BMW don't seem to have had a very good Le Mans this year, but
they will. It'll be all right.
They'll come back.
Yeah. Yeah, BMW don't sort of roll over and say, oh dear, they'll get on with it.
Well, you struggle to remember now, but of course when Audi came here, they fell flat on their face in the first year, with the original cars open and closed. It didn't really cover themselves in glory, but you've got to learn. Just like everybody else coming here, you've got to pay your dues. You have to learn how to work the car into the racetrack, and you have to learn how to deal with the traffic and all the other problems that life throws at you. And boy, did they learn. Behind the Porsche there, actually, let's take a little look at the 75 cars. We've barely talked about that Pro Speed car. It is an all-gentleman driver lineup. Paul van Splunter, Nick Hodgson and Louis Machils. But behind them has come in the Oak Racing Pescarolo. This is the young drivers Oak Racing Pescarolo. This is third in our LMP2 category, going very strongly indeed. And of course, with Henri not able to run his own team this year for various reasons, which largely involved him being stitched up by a potential backer, the Pescarolo name being represented very much by the Oak Racing team here, and the car's designer Richard de Villa here overseeing progress. Mathieu Lahaye, Guillaume Moreau and Jean Charus doing a really solid job with that car, bearing in mind its relative vintage compared to the much more up-to-date Acura and particularly HPD package. That Pescarolo Judd is giving a significantly better showing of itself than last year's Oak Racing Pescarolo Mazda's same chassis, but with a very different engine. This time they've got one that'll actually run throughout the race, and so it is doing exactly that. And here's the car that's chasing them. Was about a minute behind as they both came into the pits. Warren Hughes in the Ginetta Zytek. This is the Kiefel ASM car, which was the previous Le Mans Series champion and ruled the roost in this LMP2 category, at least until this season began. So they are finding that what they've got is working just as efficiently as before, but as we've seen with Audi and Peugeot, the opposition have taken a step forward into the future and they're not able to match it, and now all they can do is do what they do and hope that it's enough.
Yeah, go for the reliability factor.
It's very interesting looking at the leading cars' times, because the Peugeots and the first two Audis, they're seesawing backwards and forwards, the times of there. But then you look down at Tom Christensen, and he really is going very well indeed, doing 323s, where the other cars doing 24s, 25s, 26s. So he's really on it at this time of the night.
I think he's a bit miffed, actually. I think that little collision that he had sort of rather put him into a situation which he doesn't like. There's no question about it. Tom is one of those people who thinks that this should be his personal race, and it's not going quite the way he wants it to be.
Well, of course, he's trying to make up time after a delay, as is Anthony Davidson. So the cars in 5th and 6th are both going quicker than anybody in front of them. The problem is they've got several laps to catch up, and they're not going to do it on pace. They're only going to do it if somebody else has a problem to match theirs. And you tend to find at Le Mans that if you have a problem, that's pretty much it. The car that wins is the one that runs trouble-free. At the moment, Stefan Sarazan leads for Peugeot from Loic Duval in the Orica run Peugeot. That car you're looking at there, Andre Lottera's Audi is 4th. Best Audi is Romain Dumas in 5th, and then in 5th and 6th, the delayed cars of Tom Christensen for Audi and Anthony Davidson for Peugeot. And again, still the best of the non-diesel cars, 007, 009, the Lola Aston Martins. Quick break, we'll be back. Welcome back to Le Mans. Good timing, everybody. You rejoin us as our race leader is on pit road. Right down there, amongst all those orange or purple even vests, is this car, Stefan Sarazan's number 2 Peugeot. It's done 181 laps after nearly half the race. We're getting down, well, we're into 12 hours and 51 minutes remaining, so we're approaching the midway. We've just done 11 hours, and the car in for routine service now. Of course, it inherited the lead after problems for 2 cars that were running in front of it. Number 3 car with a suspension failure retired. Number 1 car with a problem with the electrics had a significant delay, and Anthony Davidson is 4 laps behind, trying desperately to catch. And the problem for this car, every time they try and go quickly, they use more fuel. Now, that sounds like a pretty staringly obvious problem. Don't go so quickly. But unfortunately, Jeremy Shaw, that's leaving them rather at the mercy of anyone else. When they try and up their pace to match their rivals, they don't make 12 laps on fuel, and nobody's quite sure why.
No, that's right. 12 laps as opposed to 13 laps. Yeah, it's at this stage it's really not particularly critical, I think, for that team at least, because they've got such a healthy margin over everybody else. I mean, it's not a huge margin by any means. I mean, it's just a little bit more than a lap over Romain Dumas in third place in the first of the Audi. So, they've been, the last 2 or 3 hours, there really hasn't been much change at the front. It's kind of an interesting kind of seesaw battle there. But, the advantage very definitely stands with Peugeot, and particularly that number 2 car. But they can't afford to relax. They just have to keep on doing what they're doing. And I just love watching that pit stop, the choreography of how the guys move around. There's only ever 2 people over that line at any one particular time, but there's about 5 or 6 people, I think, that are actually involved in that pit stop process, and absolutely fascinating to watch that unfold before our eyes there with that great camera work from the pit lane.
Just saw the little graphic there, 2 minutes 52 in the last lap between Stéphane Sarrazin in this car and his closest rival Loic Duval. Loic Duval now turning 3-minute 23.0 lap on his last lap. That is the fastest car in the field by over 2 seconds. So he is absolutely on a tear. Obviously, soon to come into the pits because he's not that far off Sarrazin's schedule, but making the very most of the car on light fuel and presumably with a relatively clean lap as well. Now, dipping down into the LMP2 class as we look at the RML Lola with its HPD engine, that's had a bit of a delay. That has now slipped from 3rd down into 5th, 6th position, and nicely bracketed by a pair of Ginettas, isn't it, Lawrence Tomlinson of Ginetta? Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, it's certainly the race that I've started watching since Nigel crashed out early on, and it's an interesting battle for us. We always thought the HPDs were going to be too quick for us to catch, and whether they're going to last 24 hours at this pace, it's a remarkable pace for LMP2. But if we were offered this at the start of the race, I think as Ginetta Zytek we would have taken it.
It does slightly look from the outside, and I don't know how much you sort of see this, as though maybe we're looking at a real generation change, and the Acura HPD package in both departments, it would seem, is another step forward. And is that something that Ginetta will sit down and think, okay, maybe it's time to get back to the drawing board and see how much we can advance this? Obviously, there's a whole new raft of rule changes coming in for 2011, some of which we may or may not be aware of, some of which may or may not change before they're finalised. But with that in mind, presumably you're already starting to make plans and scratch your head a bit.
Well, what we tend to do is look at the detail behind it, and the Ginetta LMP2 car last year was absolutely blindingly fast, and won the championship, so we were delighted with that. If you look at the detail, we have Danny Watts, who used to drive for me, and we've got Olivier Pla, who drove for me also at Petit Le Mans. So when you compare them as drivers, I know from their data there's absolutely nothing in them. So you then look at it and say, is it the car? And then you say, well, it could be the car, and you could also say there's a bit of a tyre battle going on there. The HPD's both running Michelin tyres, Ginetta Zytek's both running Dunlop. Now, Dunlop made a great advances in 09 with their tyre, no one can doubt that. Have Michelin moved on another step, doing a lot of testing with Straka? We would like to explore that, but also we'd like to improve the car, and looking at the regulations, we think we can.
I think the engine package clearly in the HPD is pretty sensational as well. I mean, it's got great horsepower, it's got great fuel economy as well. It's a pretty awesome package.
Yeah, you look at it and you see the improvements. Obviously, we look at the other car that's also, I believe, on Dunlop tyres, which is the RML car, and that's improved since it changed from AER. So it's definitely pushed them forward.
Yeah, they've certainly had less problems under the bonnet, but they seem at the moment to be replaced by other problems in other areas. So.
Yeah, I was just talking to Ray Mallock just before the pit stop there, that Andy Wallace took over from Mike Newton, and the car's been running absolutely flawlessly. I think Tommy Odos hit a rabbit at some stage a little while ago. Thankfully, well, depending which way you look at it, the rabbit came off somewhat worse than the racing car. That's good news for the racing team, not so good news for the rabbit. They've also, other than that though, the car's been running pretty much flawlessly. They've been triple stinting the tyres on that RML car, and the only sort of a problem is towards the end of the third stint there'd been quite a bit of rubber pickup on the inside and outside edges of the tyre, and that creates quite a vibration. And at one point they had to come in a little bit early to change tyres because they weren't sure, they didn't want that vibration to get out of hand, and it was making things pretty tricky from the driving side of it as well. Also, they lost some time with that very first safety car period way early in the race as a result of the Nigel Mansell crash, and that cost them also about half a lap or so as well, because they were held at the end of the pit lane, and so that didn't work out. But other than that, the car's running absolutely beautifully, and they are delighted with the performance.
Well, just for those who were probably watching a rather tepid England-USA 1-1 draw and haven't caught up with things on the BBC's fleeting coverage of it, very quickly before we put you and it to bed, just final word on how Nigel was after his crash, because obviously there was an awful lot of focus on getting him out of the car and everything.
Yeah, we've heard that Nigel flew back to Jersey and he's at home watching TV, and if Nigel's listening, watching Eurosport, I hope you're okay, Nigel, and getting well soon.
Absolutely, and really hope that we see him again. I know the boys are back at Saint Malo ready to go on a crossing if they can get out of the pub. I'm sure obviously the overriding feeling there is okay, great that he's okay, but really the disappointment, the frustration, perhaps even more than disappointment, of coming here and being so keyed up and ready to go, and all of that anticipation and preparation just kind of evaporates, and I'm sure the desire must be, right, straight away, I want to come back and do this thing now.
Well, we'd really hope so, and I was really looking forward to seeing Greg in the P1 car, having driven with Greg and Nigel. I know how quick Greg can be. He doesn't know the circuit at all, and it's I think you can never really underestimate the challenge, and having three guys, none of them have driven around here in a prototype at all, and coming here with a new team, it was a huge ask. And it's a shame that, I think they were probably let down by picking up something and having a rear puncture. Looks like the analysis of what's happened from looking at the data, that we're not absolutely certain about that.
We do seem to have had an awful lot of punctures this whole week, in actual fact, and that has been the handicap for the number 26 Highcroft Racing HPD. Marco Werner had two punctures earlier on in the evening. Franchitti had one about a bit over an hour ago, and the bad news, the even worse bad news for Marino, is he picked up the puncture going up towards the Dunlop curve, and had to therefore do a complete 8.5-mile lap.
Yeah, so
much reduced pace.
Yeah, 242 middle sector it looked like, and I saw that and I thought, I really hope that engine hasn't blown up.
I imagine you did, yeah.
So that and the other delays that it explains. That's why that car is now 3 laps down to the race leader, which is still Danny Watson, that Straka car, which is going absolutely magnificently. A couple other quick notes. We talked about the number 82 Risi Competizione Ferrari being officially retired around about 1 o'clock in the morning. That is the ongoing gear selection difficulties that you had alluded to. They did fix it, but it was just sort of the problem was resurfacing again, and rather than risk having either damage to the engine, transmission and or crashing the car, they just decided, they were out of contention to win the race. There really wasn't much point in carrying on, so they parked that car. They didn't want to do anything worse to it. And the other interesting guy I had a chat to was Xavier Masson, who's driving number 673 Luc Alphonde Corvette. And that in fact is indeed the same Corvette that just has a different colour scheme, which he races for the Mad Crop team in the FIA GT1 World Championship. And that car is running absolutely beautifully. The only delay for that number 73 car, and the only reason why it is second in class to that Celine, which I think has run pretty much flawlessly, but I think the gap now is down to maybe just over a lap, but certainly not much more than that, between the number 50 Celine and the number 73 Corvette, was the fact that Patrice Gousselard, about 3 or 4 hours ago, had an off shortly after a restart from a safety car period. He just got caught out on cold tyres, damaged the front of the car, fairly substantially, had to completely change the nose of the car, and that cost him about 20 minutes. So without that, if if St Anne's and Butts, then they'd be leading the class, and they're still running though in second place.
Yeah, they're 2 laps behind, but they have done 2 pit stops less. So that shows that Saleen has had a problem or so of its own as well. And as you say, you know, it's very easy to get caught out on cold tyres behind a safety car, loop the car around on cold tyres out of the pits, or any number of different things you can do in the next dozen hours of racing that can undo a 2-lap lead just as you're sitting there swearing at yourself for making the mistake.
That's right, because it's pretty cool out there this evening. You know, we've had the conditions through the race so far have actually been pretty remarkably nice, haven't they, Lawrence? But it is pretty cool out there, and you know, if you're behind a safety car, these tyres do cool down, and when the tyres cool down, they lose their effectiveness in a very big way.
I think that's when you're delighted to have somebody like Tom Christensen in your car, and you know he's on top of his game. And just picking up on the point you made about the 13 laps, I understand that Tom's managing to do 13 laps in his car, and I don't know if we're putting that down to him not being a left foot braker. He's probably a little bit more economical in that car.
There are all sorts of different ways, aren't they, of driving very quickly and saving the car's thirst, and that is, yes, reputedly one of them around here. Left foot braking tends to be very good in sprint racing, but tends to be a little hard because you're trying to slow the car while also keeping the gas on, and that tends to be not the best way of keeping the fuel consumption down. Christensen has just stopped in 5th. Anthony Davidson just stopping now in 6th position behind him. The difference really between the two of them is that Anthony has spent already 5 minutes more after his delay in the pit lane than Tom Christensen did. Don't forget, Tom Christensen also lost time on the track, whereas Davidson came in at normal racing pace. So much longer time in the pits is what's dropped them down to, or his team down to, 6th position in the overall standings. And in P1, Christensen in 5th. Of course, that car going off when Tom was at the wheel as he tried to get around the outside of Andy Prio's slowing BMW Art car, which has since retired as well. So Peugeot, Audi, and then a recovering Audi and a recovering Peugeot. And I think it's pretty safe to say, Lawrence, that by daylight the order is unlikely to be exactly as it is now. However, it's very hard to see that man's team, Olivier Canel's Peugeot team, losing its stranglehold on the race, barring some kind of fairly major misfortune.
Well, we had 4 Peugeots at the front, and now we've got 2, but we still have 3 Audis sat behind them. And you know, they're not what are they, one and 2 laps down, so you know, the race is far from over. Yeah, picking up on the point about the pickup and the vibration, running 3 stints on the Michelins on the RML car, I think what you've got to be concerned about that is that with this race, any vibration in the car is very damaging to it, and it can vibrate the smallest part loose and cause you the race, as we had last year when we lost a fuel union, came loose just through vibration. So you know, it's not always wise to run the 3rd stint and pick up the vibration on the car. You can vibrate any nut loose and cause issues. So and it's round here, the straights are so fast that any small out of balance on your tyres, your eyeballs are bouncing around in the socket.
Well, so much of this race is really thrown into focus by the huge speed that you carry for so long here. You know, if you go to the Grand Prix at Silverstone, you might get approaching these speeds, you know, for a second or two at the end of the Hangar Straight. But here, you're at these sort of speeds, well, for, you know, dozens or sort of 20s, 30s of seconds. And that makes a huge amount of difference to the damage that you can do, either by just having a little imbalance or even something, you know, loose in the airstream. You can get ripped off here where you'd never notice it anywhere else. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with you live with more action from Le Mans in just a second. Welcome back live to Le Mans as we see the Oreca team getting ready for driver change. That is Didier Andre ready to take over car number 6, which is currently being piloted by Sayel Ayar. If you remember last year, Hugues de Schonack running a pair of his open prototypes, the Oreca AIM, Oreca chassis, a development of what was originally the same chassis as Oak Racing are running for, no, that's their P2 class, a development of the Pescarolo P1 chassis. for which Uwe Schoenack bought the rights and then re-engineered it to call it an Oreca with an AIM engine, which is a Judd engine with re-engineered cylinder heads by a Japanese company. So essentially it's a Pescarolo Judd, although it's called an Oreca AIM. So I'll probably get told off for that. Sohail Ayari, Didier Andre and Andy Merritt are the trio. That has run reasonably reliably, currently in 10th position. While we talked about the leaders in the overall prototype class, P1 being Peugeot and Audi, and Lawrence Tomlinson, who's just left us from Ginetta, did make the point that although Peugeot are 1-2, there are 3 Audis behind them. In fact, then of course there is a third Peugeot in 6th position, but then there are more Audis as well. Let's not forget that there are the older Audis, the Coles run Audi R10s, and the best of those is in 9th place behind the 2 best placed petrol cars, which are still 007 and 009 with Adrian Fernandez and Juan Barazzi, who's just gone out in the other Gulf Lola Aston Martin. As onto pit road comes our 3rd place car, our best of the 5 Audis still in the race, and that is Romain Dumas. Takes a drink, throws it away, so he's staying in. It'll just be a fuel stop then, and in the cool of the night now, it's still clear, the lights are working well, the engine's working very well, and even though the air temperature is dropping, the heat in the tarmac is still relatively good, and certainly the heat in the tyres will be more than enough to allow them to lap now at probably close to the fastest they will all race long, as the air temperature drops but the ground temperature stays relatively stable, which is what happens in a clear sky like tonight. Then you get a temperature inversion, cold layer of air comes down from the atmosphere and holds the air close to the ground, and in that air will be lots of moisture that has risen from the overnight rain last night. So as the morning progresses into the small hours, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, we may well see quite a lot of mist around the track, and that often hovers around the trees on the straight. Of course, you've also got the River Sart not too far away, after which the circuit is named, and that tends to produce its own little microclimate as well. So not unusual, even on a dry race, to see quite a lot of misty early morning, and so that's something that will blunt the pace of the drivers a little bit. Chris Parsons.
Oh, you're saying not unusual, it's absolutely usual.
That's what I say, not unusual.
It's
that's just a more Tom Jones line.
It's
can't have a hit with "it's absolutely usual." It just doesn't work.
No, but no, the mist has always been a problem when you have a dry race here, unless it's very hot, which it certainly isn't this year.
No, it isn't, and it has rained, I think, every single day since we've come here, Jeremy. We came down on Monday. It has rained either every day or every night. More often overnight every night, but it has rained. I have to say, any fans that travel down on Friday, blinding, they've had a lovely time. If they got their tent up before it started sluicing on Friday night, it's been dry since, so they're not doing too badly. Getting messages in from the circuit, by the way, that car 009 is going slowly. That's Juan Barazzi in that second Gulf Lola Aston, just saying that the 2 Lola Astons, 7th and 8th, and they're going all right. He has just left the pits. We saw him going relatively safely up through the Dunlop S's, if not particularly quickly, but then first time out in the car for 3 hours or more, and in the dark. I wouldn't be going that hell for leather either into the Dunlop curve. However, maybe slightly more than just him being cautious. He's done a 155 second sector, where the time for the Adrian Fernandez car is 79 seconds, so he's a minute slower, and he's a minute slower in the 3rd sector, like he was a minute and a half slower in the 1st sector. So just possible that he might be coming back in. I'm not sure. He's gone by. Well, in that case, that was an 8-minute outlap. He is going to need to pick up that pace, or he'll be called in very quickly indeed. Down pit road comes Tom Christensen. Our GT2 leader is also, no, that's the second car in GT2, the 63 Corvette that is rumbling out already. Golly. And then a real hurry-up offence on that 63 car to catch up from that gravel trap incident earlier that separated them from the class leader, their teammates, by a lap and 3/4. And Tom Christensen comes in. in this delayed number 7 Audi. And this now is a relentless task for these guys. I mean, you have to be relentlessly fast to win a race from the front. Now they've got to be relentlessly fast to try and win the race from 5th position, having been delayed when they were getting into contention. And now it's going back into the garage. Now, whether this will just involve changing a nose for better lights, different aero or something like that, or whether there's slightly more going on, well, that was that done.
Yeah, it was a very strange movement, that, wasn't it? What was all that about? I don't know. I think it was a change of mind.
Yes. This is a very un-Audi style pit stop. Let's get it in, let's not get it in, let's get some tyres on, let's not get some tyres on. Oh, while we're at it, have a drink.
And have they even finished refueling it yet?
I think they finished refueling it, but
yes, because they wouldn't have moved it back in before they had. However,
I think the decision had been, right, refuel it and let's take it in there because we want to fiddle with it.
That sounds like a slightly missed communication. Meanwhile, at the other end of the pit lane, Loic Duval in the number 4 Oreca Peugeot. Despite its very different colour scheme, it is exactly the same car as the number 2 and number 1 remaining factory Peugeots. The cars from the Team Peugeot Total, as opposed to Peugeot Sport Total lineup, which was the number 3 car, which has since gone down the Swanee.
Yeah, he's been pushing very hard, actually, Duval. I know when we watched him over the last sort of few laps, he's been going very quickly.
Yes. He wants to win the race.
Yeah.
Admittedly, the other Peugeot wants to win the race, but I slightly think that there's even more get up and go in that number 4 team, the Oreca team, perhaps even than the current race leaders, who lost out last year because of a late problem with the car and just, well, felt that the win was taken away from them. But that so often happens here, that a car that looks like it could have, should have, ends up not with the victory. And again, look, you can see the hazy kind of glow over the circuit at the moment. So we are starting to get a little bit of misting already creeping into the circuit.
We were saying actually earlier on that the period sort of around about 1 o'clock, that's when you get really quick times. And then as we come or creep up towards the dawn, that's when you get a little bit of mist. That's when the actual distinction between the curb and the track begins to fuzz a little bit, and that's when you can make a mistake, and the net result of that is you break the suspension.
Don't know what's happened to that Lola Aston, because Juan Baratz's times are getting better, but they're nowhere like what they should be.
No, the first lap he did a 78-second first sector. He's now got down to a 48-second first sector. But Adrian Fernandez, admittedly a quicker driver and admittedly not just into the car, still 14 seconds quicker on the first sector, which goes from the start line to, I believe, between Tertre Rouge and the first chicane. So it's quite a long first sector, 34 seconds. That gets you all the way through the S's and out onto Tertre Rouge at least. So, yeah, he's giving away a lot of time still. He will need to get himself up to pace.
We were curious to see if he'd got all the gears that he'd started out with.
Well, he's probably got all the ones that the car came in with, unless he's mangled it on the way out, and I wouldn't want to warrant that accusation at him. Second in GT1 in pit lane. There's the 73 Corvette Alphand Aventure is the team. Julien Jousse is the driver. He was in last time, so fuel only. And Jeremy Shaw sitting next to me with your pad. Maybe we'll just interestingly see whether he's going to triple stint those tyres. That 73 car on Michelin rubber, is that? No, Dunlop rubber on that car. And the class leader in GT1, the Saleen, which for some reason I don't seem to be on. So it is on Michelin tyres, the Saleen. Now then, Danny Watts has finally been persuaded, stroke cajoled, stroke begged to get out of the car, because it does seem he's been in quite a long time in that LMP2 leading car. The Acura HPD is swapping drivers, so that car coming in at the head of the LMP2 field, Nick Leventis, Danny Watts and Johnny Kane, the 3 drivers. And I slightly imagine that perhaps they might park Nick Leventis overnight and allow the quick young guys that he's hired to join the team to get out and do what it is that they've been hired to do, which is drive the wheels off the thing and try and win their class. And at the moment, they seem to be having just a better rub of luck than their direct rivals, the Highcroft team in the other HPD chassis, because the Highcroft team are now 3 laps behind after a number of delays. And whatever seems to have happened to Strachan, they have had incidents. They've been off and they've been held up by safety cars. Again, it's all back down to lady luck. You can't win this race without luck. You can't win it without a good car, good team, good drivers and good preparation. But if you don't have luck on the team, it's not coming your way. So he heads back out onto track.
Is it still Davidson at the wheel of number 1?
It is indeed.
Because he's suddenly decided that he wants to go a little bit.
I don't think he suddenly decided at all, but he has got a particularly free lap, a 3 minutes 21.9. Now, the fastest we've seen from him recently is 3:21.6, but that is very quick race pace indeed. So Anthony Davidson, like Tom Christensen, desperate to make up for that mistake. Because don't forget, for that delay, don't forget when the number 1 car was dragged back into the garage losing charge, it was our race leader, and it was pulling away quickly from its Peugeot rivals behind it. So they feel that this race owes them something special. Now, after losing the Art car, more heartache for the Schnitzer mechanics. It's been a very long 6 months to get the car here. One of 3 parallel programs they're running, a whole host of cars they've built. They're not using the same car and just changing bits. They're all different cars. And after the 79 car has retired with as yet, or at least 2 hours ago when I asked, as yet undiagnosed problems because the car hadn't come back, now looks like they've got a loose left front or a problem with the left front brakes on car number 78, which is a shame because actually that had been going relatively quickly and was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th in the GT2 class and starting to try and move up the order a little. Andre Lotter on pit road, Audi number 8. And a very quick first sector for him, fastest of that car's entire race. One of the quickest laps it's turned, a 3:32 in lap. That's pretty quick. He was very quick in the first sector, quickest of all within 2/10 of that car's quickest lap in the second sector, and then came into the pits. So obviously light fuel, guys, but still you've got to use it. You can give me an Audi with 1 tank worth of fuel and I won't be doing 320 anythings.
No, these guys are very quick indeed.
Well, Lotter back out and matching the team's pace in the pit stop with his acceleration out of the pit lane, because there were 2 cars coming up fast behind them. They can't even identify them, can't even spot them in that shot. So one of them was a prototype, so I'm not sure it was a P1 or a P2 car, but Lotter certainly left it for dead, squirting out of the pit lane. Now coming towards us, looks like our GT2 leader, yeah. In fact, that's just a gamble, isn't it? There's one of 2 Corvettes. Could be Manu Collard, the leader, or Antonio Garcia in second place. The 1 light on the side tells me that I gambled correctly. It is our GT2 class leader. And we're used to seeing Corvette running reliably, fast, strong, without too many dramas at the front of the field. In the GT1 class, they were beaten a couple of years by Aston Martin, but they have been very much the team that set the benchmark to which others aspired, including Aston Martin in GT1. And so they now seem to be in benchmark position in GT2. They had a really good battle with the Risi Competizione Ferrari early on. They've been battling with the Porsches as well, but seem to have left them behind. And now it is really whether or not the Corvettes can get to the end, 1 and 2, or whether fate will intervene. There is a brake problem. They've got the brake caliper separators in the front of the car. It's only front left, which slightly worries me. If I was having 1 set of brake pads changed on a road car, I'd want both sets changed. So they're obviously still working with a pedal pressure problem on this car.
Well, They seem to be screwing it back together, so they obviously think they know what's up with it.
I'm sure they think they do know what's up with it, but the mechanic inside looked to me a little bit as though he might have been down in the footbox or maybe adjusting something on the brake balance bar. So clearly the driver of that Porsche, Augusto Farfus, not really happy with the way it was stopping, or very probably wasn't. Car number 12 on pit road, again with the scars of battle on the number 12 car. The Rebellion has got tank tape holding bits on. It's had its fair share of in and outs of the pits. And coming in now, which of the Ginettas are we expecting? Was that the Kiefer pit? This is Giancarlo Fisichello's first pit stop for Ferrari. There's a sentence you don't get to say very often, is it? And this is not going to be a 4-second tyre change, is it? This is a very much slower progress here. They seem to have a second ergo man over the line there. They need to be very careful about that. Oh, and into the garage goes Ugo Schonach's number 6 car, Didier Andre, and he took it over about 3 laps ago. It's back in, sneaked in under the radar, pushed straight back in as Fisichella is down and gone. There he goes, up the hill, round the corner. Can he do it? Yes, he can. 008 is in for service as well. Busy time in the pit lane. So we'll take a quick commercial break and let you all get your breath. We'll be back with more from Le Mans in just a second. Wake up! Stop! Don't go to sleep yet. You can't. It's still 12 hours and 16 minutes to go at Le Mans. We have got a lot more racing to get through before you're allowed to go to bed. I don't care if you want to slumber on the sofa. Just man up a bit and stay with us. Live coverage continues on Eurosport. Martin Haven, Chris Parsons, Neville Hay watching the action. And we seem to be in one of those periodic pit lane flurries where every man and his dog is coming in with problems. Rapid disassembly of almost the entire front end of Gary Challenden's number 41 Ginetta Zytek in the LMP2 class, and the corporate guests have clearly quaffed enough champagne. Is there such a thing as enough champagne?
No, can't be. Actually, I don't like champagne. It gives me a headache, so it's really, I'm the wrong person to ask about that. No, this I thought was a brake problem, but I'm not so sure now.
I think they're not so sure now either. They're putting an entire new nose on. Yep. So, well, we did see it nosed off into the barriers, didn't we? I think this is one of those things where the job list reached critical mass. He came in and they kidnapped him, stuck him in the garage and said, right, we're now going to change all the things that everyone has broken in the last 6 hours. And that may well be exactly what's going on with the Didier Andre car as well.
2,000 mile service.
That's a good example of why you put the car in the garage, because you can get any number of mechanics working on it.
And you don't get Nick Damon from Radio Le Mans in the way there yet. Thanks, Nick. We're going a different way on that. Car number 60. Oh, yes, it is car number 60. This is the remaining Maytech competition Ford. Thomas Much, Romain Grosjean and Jonathan Hershey lying third in GT1 despite their delays. Romain Grosjean, of course, crashed this car early in practice and did a lot of damage in free practice, but it didn't affect them too much in qualifying. Actually, it's been running very quickly. One major delay, and unfortunately that has dropped them. What did we say it was? Oh, I'm losing track of GT2 now. Leaders on 161 laps. They're on 152. Do the sums yourself. I make it 9 laps. Could be anything between 0 and 20, frankly, but they're 9 laps behind. But still, it seems that they are running very quickly, and enough to keep them in front of Jerome Policar, who's 3 laps behind them in the second Alphond Aventure Corvette. The Aston Martin, the junior driver's Aston Martin, a further lap back, is in 5th place in GT1 with now the young driver in it, Christopher Nygaard. And the remaining GT1 car, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th in class and still going and still on page 2 of the timing screen, so visible is, well, not still going actually, is the Lamborghini, the Japanese Lamborghini Owners Club, the J-Lock Lamborghini, Murcielago at Sushi Yogo. I'm guessing no longer still at the wheel because it must have been stationed in the pits for well over an hour, and I'm assuming that at some stage the Japanese will get round to announcing that it is retired, because it certainly ain't going round very much.
we got the Straka car completely wrong, because in fact it is Nick Leventis who's got into the car at this time of night. We thought he'd stay out, but no, Nick has taken the car over.
Well, in fairness, we didn't think that was just me suggesting it. So he's obviously intent on doing his fair share.
Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, first sector time 39.2. That's 3 seconds off Pierre Rag in the 008 Aston. So that's not too bad. And he will, I'm sure, take a lap or two really to get his head around full night here at Le Mans and the speed and the other cars and everything else. Meanwhile, at the 15, yes, is the Collis Audi. It took me a while to recognise if it was an R10. Actually, it is an R10 Audi.
Yeah, he's having a 1,000-mile service, isn't he?
Well, we saw this so often with Audi, didn't we? Okay, we need a bit of a change of downforce because we're now getting a little bit quicker because it's cooler. Right, stick the extra downforce bit more one nose on. Which downforce nose you want? We want downforce nose 3, please. Thank you very much. And it's quicker than fiddling around trying to go, oh, are you going 2 clicks up on your wing? Yes, me too. So, halfway through the race, barring 11 minutes, we've got 12 hours and just under 12 hours and 12 minutes to go. So, the race is still very much in its infancy, Nev, and
yes, it's curious, isn't it?
Tend to get a little hiatus here now, where not an awful lot of very noticeable things happen until it starts to become daylight, and then suddenly everybody gets their second win.
5 o'clock in the morning is when it all starts to happen.
As soon as the sun comes up, they crash and bits fall off and all sorts of nonsense.
It's quite curious, isn't it? You know, long 24-hour race, off they go. 2-3 hours, you lose some cars. Then it slows down. You have lots of little things going wrong, you know, sort of, oh, nose cone go, oh, tyre goes, all this sort of thing. Get to halfway, and usually, as you say, it's quite quiet. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, then suddenly, about 5, 6 o'clock, it all starts to happen.
Yeah, and there's no logical reason why it should do, but every year it's exactly the same.
Body clocks.
Is it that? Because I'm not a morning person, I have to honestly admit, I'm a night person. I hate getting up early in the morning.
Well, one of the things that happens, obviously, is as the visibility starts to rise a little, but the temperature is still relatively low, drivers can push even faster than they can, perhaps, you know, in the darkest part of the night. Plus, also, you then get the fatigue enhanced by a bit of extra sunlight. That seems to do something. It gives you the sleepy eyes and just a little bit more sloth. And then, of course, you know, the cars by that stage have been going for 17, 18 hours, and so bits that hadn't fallen off in 17 or 18 minutes are looking considerably more prone to fall off.
Oh, that's certainly true.
Is it me, or has that car now done a complete stint between...
Oh, don't say things like that. We quite like them.
No, yes, of course. Oh, dear.
There you go.
Darren, you've just opened your mouth again, and more trouble.
There's the second place car, also going into the garage.
Dollying as Loic Duval is whisked back into the garage. And
what did you just say, Neville?
Well, there you go. I think if you chaps are listening, you know, sort of Demon Barber and all the rest of it, it's not dull here. You are missing something. You should have come.
Quick message to mechanic and PR guys. Generally speaking, you'll find it wasn't the TV crews that broke your car. It's not the TV cars that designed the other people's cars. So there's nothing much we can do by showing your car being fixed that will either help you fix it or help your rivals take advantage of it. It's broken. Get on with it. Well, let us see what you're doing, or don't come at all.
I maintain it's commentator's curse. It's this one, this Chris here, who's doing it.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid Mr. Parsnip has done for Paul Lord Drayson, so I shall tell him that.
Well, and...
bang goes your OBE.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, well, never mind. I won't get a French one either. I killed off
oh yes, well, you might have got
the Orica car as well.
Now number 2, so lead pair of cars are on pit road. Luckily that one's not been shuffled back into the garage. That would have been far too much synchronicity for any sane what's the word I'm looking for? Conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The team here having we put the curse on all of them.
Right, don't talk at all about anyone we like. Oh dear, that narrows it right down. That means I can't mention Tom Coronel or Peter Dumbrick or the Spiker team. This is Tom Coronel, World Touring Car driver, VLN driver. I'll turn Nev's mic off while Jeremy whispers sotto voce to him. And the Spiker in for regular service. It's been a bit of a troublesome little piggy, I'm afraid, again this year, the Spiker. But they seem to have ironed out a few of its wrinkles and threatened it with a big enough cudgel that it is not intent on coming into the pits all the time. It is, however, and I probably won't be thanked for mentioning this, last in the field in 41st place.
Jeremy was saying to me that he thought number 4 Peugeot had been in before about 4 or 5 laps ago. And I thought that, and you know, we were looking at a car that was going out and you thought it was going very slowly, and we, both of us sort of said, oh yeah, well I think it is probably the, I decided it must be the Lola because you'd said so. I'm not so sure that it wasn't number 4 Peugeot.
It wasn't number 4 Peugeot going slowly, but it has been in recently. This is its 16th pit stop compared to 15 for the race leader and for the car behind it, Romain Dumas. So this is an out-of-sequence pit stop, but it's only its first out-of-sequence pit stop, because it did not have a stop in hand over Sarrazin. So yes, this is its first major drama.
Yes, but Martin, you don't put the whole engine cover over the pit door.
Yes, you do, because that's the way they do things. Because apparently, major manufacturers expect to come here, and no matter how badly they treat the media, then be feted afterwards for managing to complete a race distance.
They don't want us to see. They don't want us to see what they're doing.
We're seeing it now.
Well, you know what they don't want? They don't want Audi to find out what they've done to the nose of the car, which is the only thing we can see. There is actually a rule which says that all cars must be visible from the pit lane.
Martin.
So that the ACO can see that they're not doing something nasty in the cheating department. I'm going to get rid of one of you codgers immediately, because a very fine-looking young woman.
I knew that's what you were going to say, and I was going to volunteer straight away.
Collapse of a number of stout parties and said good-looking young lady.
Yeah.
Well, come on in, Fiona Miller, and say hello to us. Fiona, for those of you who have not been regular Radio Le Mans listeners, and shame on you if you haven't, helped me out a very great deal in my formative years of Radio Le Mans by listening and then being communicative. And I think that she ought to perhaps run PR courses for a very large number of the teams at the moment.
Absolutely true.
Fiona, hello. Very disappointed to see you here, I'm afraid.
Yes, I know. It's I'd actually much rather be down in the pits, sort of being terribly busy with 2 cars, and instead I'm half as busy with only 1.
I have a task for you. Go down to the pits and kick a few PR people and recalcitrant mechanics in the shins down at the Peugeot end, because they're not covering themselves in friends.
No, it's certainly been a bit of a race, hasn't it, up at the front as well as down the back. I mean, there was some classic battles up at the front at the beginning, and I think the GT class really gave everybody a wonderful spectacle for the first quarter. It's a shame it slipped away a bit, and our gear selection problems probably helped that enormously.
Yes, enormously. Just to clarify for those of you that aren't members of the media, i.e. everyone who's listening, Fiona is the press attaché, officer, girl, genius, guru for Risi Competizione.
Too kind.
So she's been looking after not only the car that was our LMP2 class, GT2 class leader, the red one, the number I can't remember
82.
now. 82, that's 82. Right. That was giving us such great entertainment earlier on with the Corvette at the lead of the GT2 class, but also looking after the 83 car, which is the Krone Racing green version, isn't it?
That's correct, yes. Both Jimmy Bruni, well, in fact, all 3 of our drivers, Bruni, Jamie Mello and Pierre Capper, had some terrific scraps with the Corvette drivers, and it was one of those sort of really firm but fair fights. And you know, I'm sure the Corvette drivers will all agree that it was the sort of fight that you really wish you could have in every race.
Absolutely.
It just made the whole thing come alive.
Very much kind of Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca ding ding gloves on round 2, because it looked exactly like that one.
Yeah, it really was. It was kind of like the sprint races that we have in the States, where you have sort of like a 2-hour 45 all out from flag to flag sort of fight together, and it was like that, and there was no reason why it couldn't have gone being like that, and we just unfortunately had this problem which we've never had before, and it's just sort of put an early halt to our attack on that.
And that's a real pain, because I have absolutely no doubt the drivers of both cars, your car and the Corvette, would have got out after their seats going, God, that was fun.
They did.
God, that was the best racing I've had here in years. Because you go racing to race close and wheel to wheel with each other. And we were watching them for a time. Our director was really enjoying it, clearly, because we were watching pass after pass after chicane after chicane. They were swapping the lead, corner after corner they were swapping the lead, and that's what every team wants, to be in that kind of a battle.
That's right. I think, you know, no detail racing and passing is what everybody loves to see, and not knowing what's going to happen from one lap to the next. And I think that makes it hugely enjoyable as a team member, but also quite obviously hugely enjoyable as a spectator.
Well, listen, Ricci got this hugely enviable record in endurance racing. I mean, particularly in the long distance racing, but also in the sprint races in the American Le Mans Series. It's a really strong team, really strong engineering, and they've got, you know, great kit with the Ferrari, but great driver talent as well. I mean, every box that you want on your wish list has been ticked, and that's the secret, really, isn't it? There is no secret. It's an open secret. You buy the best of everything, and you work the hardest with what you've got.
Yes, I mean, I think it, you know, as I'm sure every successful team up and down the pit lane would say, the secret is the package, and it's having everything that all comes together at the right time. So when you have, you know, a proven race car that you know is going to be reliable and strong, that doesn't have problems that recur again and again. You have a very strong tyre package, which we have with Michelin. You have an excellent driver lineup, and I mean, I think ours is really one of the best that there is in GT racing. And you've just sort of put it all together, and the other secret, of course, is having a team that knows how to prepare for these races. And Giuseppe Ricci is a firm believer that preparation is everything, and that's really, I think, which up until now has given us this amazing run of 6 races in the go.
Well, sooner or later, you know, every run has to come to an end, and sooner or later, no matter how good your preparation, as everybody knows, your Le Mans turns around and kicks you in the teeth, and then
It was the best way to be introduced to this.
Welcome back to Le Mans, where I hope you are now hearing us. I gather that for a while our interesting and informative commentary was rather wasted on you, since you weren't hearing a word of it. However, let's just very quickly, before we get back to our guest Fiona from the Ricci Competizione team, let's just very quickly catch up with the car that is no longer second, but is now fourth, as it's being reassembled from its component parts which have been used to block our view of it. Something happened to that Peugeot, and interestingly enough, we've got no idea what it was. Anthony Davidson remains at the wheel of the car that he brought in and was whisked in from second place into the garage. As I said, it is now down to fourth place. So Audi, from having been whipped out of sight in the first hour of the race, are now lying second and third. The wheels are coming off the Peugeot wagon relatively quickly. Anthony Davidson is in fourth place, Tom Christensen in fifth place, Loic Duval has now slipped to sixth place.